Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Woodstock, Georgia. This is Fearless Formula with Sharon Klein. Welcome to Fearless Formula on Business RadioX, where we talk about the ups and downs of the business world and offer words of wisdom for business success. I'm your host, Sharon Klein, and I haven't done a show in like a month, so I'm so happy to be back at the studio. I've been missing my chit-chats with various people here in Cherokee County, but today I'm excited to chit-chat with an attorney with the company, I guess it's called Field Connolly Walker LLP.
Flint, Connolly, and Walker, that's right. We're a law firm in downtown Canton.
That's right. This is Ben Peeler. He's an attorney, and I just asked him what the difference between attorney and lawyer is because I don't know the difference. So why don't you explain?
Sure. Well, there is no real difference between an attorney and a lawyer. I'm sure, back in the 1610 in England where, we get all of our legal system from, or 90% of it, there was some, very critical difference. And if you called someone a lawyer and they were really an attorney, you would have to get into a duel. But
These days they don't do that? That's
right. The biggest difference is if you're in Georgia, sometimes you'll be called a lawyer. And if you're in New York, you'll be a lawyer. That's about it.
But they all do the same thing.
That's right.
Ben, you are a Georgia native.
That's right. I grew up in Sandy Springs, was born in a hospital that doesn't exist anymore. It was Dunwoody Hospital, and lived in Sandy Springs until I went to UGA for undergrad. And then because I couldn't figure out what else to do, I went to UGA for law school.
Because you just weren't sure. You just didn't have that 100% know my direction kind of thing.
Oh, absolutely. I thought that I would go into medicine up until about my junior or senior year of college, and then realized that was not going to happen.
Why did you realize that?
So I'm the only attorney in my family. I didn't have any sort of idea about what being an attorney looked like. I didn't know really, I didn't know any attorneys really. Most of my family were in medicine, and I figured I would follow into their footsteps until I spent a lot of time hanging out and shadowing with various doctors of different specialties, and they were all, very wonderful people. But I realized very quickly it was something that I was not cut out to do. The work and the patients and everything, and medical school just would not have been for me. And so I had to take a very quick about face and figure out what I was going to do. Because my undergraduate degree was in microbiology. It was way too late at that point to change majors. And so I had to sort of roll with the punches and adapt and figure out what I was going to do. And I had basically decided that I was going to take a bunch of, standardized tests out of after finishing college. While I did that, I spent a year working at a liquor store and stocking the shelves. I was not very good at that. But I took the LSAT, which is the law school test, and did well enough on that I figured, hey, maybe I can stick around Athens for a couple more years. And so that's what I did.
So when you are contemplating law school, do they ask you to specialize in a particularly kind of law, a particular kind of law?
No. So that's one of the things that I think is very interesting about going to law school and being a lawyer is, the person that negotiates LeBron James's contract, and the person on the Supreme Court, and, someone that you see, commercials or advertisements for on the subway, they all got the same degree, sometimes from the same school. When you're a first year, what's called a 1L in law school, you take a standardized sort of regimen of courses. You'll take your first semester, and this is true at pretty much any law school you go to across the country. But at Georgia, at least, you'll take torts, contracts, and civil procedure and legal writing your first year. Everybody does it. Your second year, you'll take constitutional law, criminal law, and then you get to pick something else that you want to take. And Georgia is a really great law school, and so they offer all kinds of directions that you can go to. But it's really sort of up to you,
like what resonates with your heart, or
exactly,
something.
to figure out. I like this. I don't really like this. I learned very early on I do not like criminal law, so I stayed away from that. And I found out pretty early on that I liked intellectual property. Going into law school, like I said, I didn't know any lawyers. I didn't know really anything about the law. I didn't know what a tort was. So that was an interesting first day of that class.
I bet there's so many. I mean, it's just the idea of understanding all of the different laws and reasons we have them and how complicated they can be and how litigious this whole world can be. Mm-hmm. I imagine it's overwhelming.
Yeah. That I think that's a big part of what going to law school is about. Is it's not training you to be, a lawyer in the sense that as soon as you get out, you're ready to, get into practice and get into court. Obviously, they prepare you a little bit for that, but mostly it's about how do you think like a lawyer and how do you think in a way where you can, make an argument, argue a position, and serve a client. But before realistically, it took me about a year or so out of law school and clerking to really understand the business side of law. That's something that they don't really cover in school.
True, because you are going to you have to understand the law, but then you have to understand how to navigate a business of law.
Exactly.
Which is fascinating too. It's like being a doctor, but then you have to figure out the part of you that is like the doctor's practice. You're going to be on your own, or are you going to be part of a family practice, or how are you going to contract yourself out or whatever?
Exactly.
It's a lot.
Yeah, and I don't think that it's something that they cover in medical school, from what I understand. That at least, but yeah, in law school, 90%, 95% of what you learn is not, how do you file something with the court? How do you talk to a client who's angry about, how their case is going? How do you get business? How do you get a new client in? That's something that you have to learn when you're when you're already out, when you're in practice, sort of on the streets, so to speak.
When you talk about intellectual property, it's so interesting because it's not like we're talking a physical something sometimes, right? So how do you, explain, if you don't mind, what intellectual property is?
Sure. So the best explanation that I can come up with to differentiate real or personal property with intellectual property is, if I have an apple and I eat the apple, or I grow the apple, or I sell the apple, you can't have the apple. Just, by the laws of physics, if I have it, you can't also have it. But the same isn't true for an idea or a song, a story, or a trademark, anything like that. If I tell you the story, now there's, functionally, there's two copies of the story in the world. And if you tell somebody, it can go on, and me having the story doesn't stop anyone else from holding on to it in the same way it would for something, physical. So law sort of developed around how do you protect something that we want artists to be able to profit from their work. We want to encourage, in the sort of John Lockean, Adam Smith style of capitalism and sort of the ideas of the free market and enjoying the fruits of your labor. How do we allow somebody who creates something to enjoy the fruits of their labor if somebody can take those fruits without, physically lifting them off the ground? And so that's where intellectual property came from. There's sort of Well, there's four big, I guess, branches on the intellectual property tree. As I said before, there's trademarks, which has to do with protecting the identity of your business. So if your business, you want to let people know that a product or a service is yours, and you want to stop competitors from passing it off as theirs, counterfeiting, that sort of thing. This sort of whole idea came about in the Middle Ages, where blacksmiths would stamp their work, or artisans would stamp their work.
Or bread. I heard bread companies would put their own almost logo on top of bread when they baked it, so they could say it was theirs.
Right. Yeah. Some identifier of source, so that people know, hey, this is good quality because I made it. But I don't want other people to take this mark that I've come up to identify it as mine and use it, because they might not have as good of a quality as I do. So that's sort of where trademarks came out of. And as you sort of said, now a whole lot of things can be a trademark. Obviously, you've got the pretty standard ones, like the word Amazon is trademarked.
Even just the word, but not just the logo.
Exactly.
Right.
Just the word can be a trademark. The logo can be a trademark. You think Apple, the picture of the apple with the bite taken out of it. That alone is a trademark. Things like colors can be trademarks. The John Deere tractors, that green, that's trademarked.
Interesting.
Sounds can be trademarked. The Taco Bell ding, that's trademarked. If I open up a taco stand, I can't use that same ding to advertise my tacos.
I am sure every place I look, there is some trademark associated with some, even Business RadioX with their own trademark.
Absolutely. Yeah. And they're very important. But they're just, like I said, one branch of the intellectual property tree. You've also got copyrights, which are basically any sort of work of, they typically fall into works of art, but really any sort of work of creativity. Books, songs, poems. I'm going to get a little technical. If it can be fixed in what's called a tangible medium of expression. So anything creative that can be fixed in a tangible medium of expression, that means painted on a wall, put on a CD, a photograph.
Something that you've created that's out of your mind and actually into the world.
And that someone else can look at and experience what was in your mind.
Wow. All of these definitions are so important, right? Because someone could come and say, well, I mean, they didn't do this. It's just because it exists here doesn't mean that it's this. I could just imagine someone trying to use semantics to make it seem like they're not doing something wrong.
Well, that's our job, Yeah. in a sense, that's sometimes when you don't have the facts on your side, you've got to really wiggle the law to try and get your client out of a jam. But so copyrights, those are more so for sort of artistic works, but anything creative, the bar is basically as low as a phone book. If it's any more creative than a list of names and phone numbers in alphabetical order, it can be copyrighted.
Okay.
The third branch are patents. Without getting too deep into it, that's one of the things that I specialize in. Patents are basically a contract between you and the government to say, I've invented this thing. Utility patents, which are the most common kind, have to do with inventions. They're what you typically think of with a patent. Something that you've created that's useful and helps people. And a patent is basically a contract with the government that says, in exchange for me telling everybody else how this thing works, the government will give me a monopoly on my invention for 20 years. Realistically, it's more like 17 years, but in essence, that's what it is. It's, I've invented this thing. I will tell everybody else how this thing works so that when my monopoly expires, everyone gets to use this thing. Everyone gets to enjoy sort of the benefits of my of my creativity, my, ingenuity. But for now, because we're trying to protect that idea, incentivize people to spend the time, tinkering. You think of the person tinkering in their garage, right? They invested time, they invested money, and they invested their, intellectual capabilities into making this thing. We want to be able to reward them, and not just as soon as they make it, someone else comes along and gets to use it without.
Yeah, they don't get to profit if in some way, for their own inspiration and hard work. Got it.
Exactly. So that's a patent, a utility patent. There's also design patents, but they're a little bit more niche. Don't really need to get into it right now. Mm-hmm. And then the fourth big branch are trade secrets.
Ooh.
And I know, getting close to Halloween.
And there's attorney-client privilege too, right? So you're going to have some trade secrets. What's an example of like a fake trade secret, one that doesn't get you in trouble?
Well, I can give you an example of a real trade secret that I don't know the secret of, so we're all good.
Okay.
The formula, well, there's two. I guess since we're in Georgia, I'll say the Coca-Cola secret formula is a trade secret, right? I know that they have a secret formula, but I don't know what it is. So as long as they try to keep it a secret, they can protect it, and I can't, sneak into their office, try and crack the safe to get to it.
Okay.
Trade secrets are sort of the flip side, the other side of the coin of patents, right? Patents are you telling everybody how this thing works. Trade secrets are nobody can know how this works, because again, I've spent time and money and intellectual capability to develop this ingenuity, right? This way of doing business, this chemical, this whatever. And so people should be punished if they try and, break the secret.
Got it.
So yeah, WD-40 is the other, the other example of a
trade secret.
Right. What the formula of that is.
So how often are you defending my brain runs very fast, so I'm trying to articulate what I mean.
No problem.
So let's say that I have my own podcast here, Business RadioX, and I want to use a quick sound from Joe Rogan's podcast because it applies, right? I'm taking his voice and putting it into my podcast, but that's his voice, right? Am I allowed to use that?
So you're touching on something that's it's very important, especially like you said in sort of today's media environment. Streaming and YouTube and podcasts.
People can take lots of things,
right? This comes up a lot. It's something called fair use, and this applies to mostly pretty much copyrighted material and trademark material. Think, you watch SNL and they have, maybe Target or something,
right?
Target isn't sponsoring that skit, but they can still use it. Fair use is, we've recognized that there are limits to protection for intellectual property, and that there's sometimes when you're using it where it's not harming the creator of it in the way that we want to protect them. So, an example of fair use that you'll see, fairly often is, or particularly on things like YouTube, are commentary or criticism. If you're providing commentary, if you're reviewing a movie, you can show parts of that movie, you can show parts of that podcast, whatever it is that you're commenting or reviewing, because otherwise, how could the people that you're giving the review for know what you're talking about? But your review isn't a substitute for the movie. People aren't watching your review normally, aren't watching your review instead of watching the movie. They're watching your review because they want to know what you think about the movie.
So it's okay to use a clip of, or just in the background or whatever, a little bit of the movie.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
To explain.
For context.
Right. To explain what you're talking about. Another example is things like parody or satire. There's the sort of quintessential case in the legal world for parody and satire is the song Pretty Woman by Roy Orbison.
Okay.
Two Live Crew did a cover of that song, but a parody of it, where instead of Pretty Woman, it was Big Hairy Woman.
What? I have missed that in my history of life. I don't know how I'd never heard of this. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
But it's a pretty funny pretty funny parody.
Okay.
But yeah, the record company who owned Pretty Woman sued Two Live Crew, saying, "Hey, that's our song. You can't, and obviously they used a big portion of the Pretty Woman song. They used enough to make you think that they were covering Pretty Woman."
Mm-hmm.
And Two Live Crew was successful in arguing, no, it's a parody. We're allowed to make fun of this thing. We're not, people aren't wanting to listen to Roy Orbison and then saying, oh, well, Two Live Crew will do. They want to listen to someone make fun of Roy Orbison. And
you're allowed to do that.
And you're allowed to do that. And sort of that's where, at least for me, the really fun intellectual part of it gets in, because in the case of parody, you want to get as close as you can to the thing that you're making fun of, because it's not a good joke if the people watching can't tell what you're making fun of.
Like Weird Al Yankovic doing all that kind of parody of Michael Jackson and everything else,
Exactly. And in Weird Al's case, I think he gets permission from the artist, but it's more of a respect kind of thing. He just wants to be respectful and make sure the artist, is okay with their song being made fun of. But legally, I don't want to make a blanket statement, but in nearly every case, he probably could get away with making the song without their permission. He just
asks out of respect. I mean, that's great.
Exactly.
Well, so can someone's voice be trademarked? Like, oh my gosh, who's got an amazing voice? All right, let's say Demi Moore has a very distinctive sort of raspy sound. Mm-hmm. Can her voice be trademarked in some way where someone can't take it and use it for something?
So that gets into, it's a very good question. And it gets into what are called your rights of publicity, which are very related. It's sort of an offshoot of this copyright, this intellectual property. And how it relates to sort of your rights as a person. Obviously, this is a huge topic right now with all AI coming out, where you can get AI copies of celebrities singing songs, or even
saying a bunch of things they'd never say in real life, right?
Exactly.
How do you deal with that?
It's tough. Sort of practically speaking. It's a violation of your right to publicity. If I have a AI of Demi Moore's voice saying something or singing something and that she didn't sing, just philosophically we can understand that's not fair, that's not right. And she has a right to her image. This is coming up to, we're hitting a lot of topics. Mm-hmm. This is coming up to, college sports with the name, image, and likeness, developments that are happening there, that we have a right to our name, our image, our likeness, what our voice is. And it's something that is in a very sort of cutting edge area of the law right now. The law is a little slow to catch up to technology. The law is almost always way behind technology and just barely catching up before the new sort of technological advance happens. But yeah, so to get back to your original question, you wouldn't necessarily copyright your voice, trademark your voice, but you would have a right to the use of your voice. And so if someone else tried to use it to promote something or just to use it, you would be able to stop them. And
Whoa. So I'm thinking about how much is okay. Say, for example, I go on TikTok and someone has got a little quick screenshot of someone else's TikTok and they want to talk about what the story is. Those things are okay. I mean, this is like happening, like you said, real time, all the time. And the law cannot predict that there's going to be AI or TikTok where these things come up. So they do have to catch up, I imagine.
Oh, yeah.
But are those the kinds of cases that you specifically deal with?
So those are among the types of cases. Yes, we we deal with on both the plaintiff, the person bringing a lawsuit, and the defendant, the person defending a lawsuit. We both bring cases for people and defend people in a variety of intellectual property issues, copyrights, trade. There's a trademark dispute. Someone someone has a business name that they've been operating under for 15 years, and then they find out that somebody else in Tennessee or somebody else in Mississippi, wherever, is using that same name and just started, and customers are being confused. They Google, I'm just going to make up a name.
Yeah.
A1 delivery or something. They're Googling for that, and then the business in Mississippi comes up, and they wanted the business in Georgia. We assist people in those sorts of cases with help with protecting their mark, protecting the name of their business, because if people don't, if you can't protect the name of your business, ultimately that is your business.
Wow. Okay. So is there a particular case that you've worked on that is sort of the one that stands out in your mind, something you think about a lot, or was specifically like either the most challenging, the most rewarding? Is there something that sort of, I don't know, takes up space in your mind more than something else?
Oh gosh. That's a hard one. I'd have to think about that. Every case is so unique, and has its own sort of challenges, and there's times where, there's times where it's looking rough, and then you pull out and you're like, wow, we killed it. We did great on that. I work with an office of just absolutely fantastic lawyers and fantastic people. And so for any given case, there's a few that probably come to mind. I don't necessarily want to get into specifics about what they were about. Just trying to be respectful of everyone's privacy.
Of course.
But there's there have been an interesting patent case that I worked on that involved that involved sort of this software that was sort of on the cutting edge of assisting businesses in their marketing efforts, and sort of the challenges of something that cutting edge, trying to get that going with the Patent and Trademark Office, the USPTO.
Got you.
And yeah, they're interesting trademark cases. But the other thing that I do as well is, we do a little bit of just general litigation. So anything really involving a business. I work on a lot of construction cases, and just, business disputes between businesses or between business partners.
What do you think you've learned about humans, human nature, in your interactions with people?
Wow. Really pulling out the deep ones, huh?
That's what Fearless Formula is all about.
No, it's a great question. What have I learned about human nature? I think part of it is that people can be a little quick to they can be a little quick to judge, and they can be a little quick to sort of want justice or want I guess a quick resolution to things without understanding, the sort of the legal process is ever moving, but it is ever slow. And so one of the things that I always try and tell people when they start off with us is, this is not going to be, an easy breezy process. And unfortunately, there are probably a lot of lawyers that will tell you that will try and sell you and say, sign up with us, we'll get you won't have to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how it works. But, slow and steady wins the race, as they say. And so we usually come out pretty well, but I think people, from what I've observed, I think people are generally fundamentally good in that they want justice, and that very few times, in very few cases that I've worked, there's ever been a bad guy. Most of these are just people with all kinds of life stresses, outside of the case that we're working on, that have their own problems in their lives. And, we see a piece of it, but they're not the villain. It's easy to tell yourself, particularly when you're on the other side of a case with someone, when you're in a fight with somebody, that they're a villain and that you're a hero. But part of our job is to stay objective. Abraham Lincoln said, whoever represents themselves as an attorney has a fool for a client.
Mm-hmm.
Our job is to sort of stay objective and stay sort of outside and be able to see sort of the big picture and sort of take the emotion out of things. And I think that being in that role, you do get to see, that ultimately, we have a duty to our client, but that our client is just a person dealing with another person. And at the end of the day, people don't typically want to fight. They want to get along. And so if you can help them do that, I think that's, I think that's sort of what we're here to do.
How challenging is it to keep your emotions out of your, I don't know, I want to say work, but being able to relate to people who are in a very highly charged emotional state? Because oftentimes we're talking about money, right? So, and money just kind of can bring out some of the worst in people. So how do you keep yourself from becoming emotionally involved? What do you do?
Well, I think that's a great observation that, a lot of the times people come to us in sort of highly charged circumstances because money is involved, and they want, people care a lot about their money.
Of course.
And so keeping out of that emotional state, I think is not terribly difficult because it's not my money.
Right. Okay.
And I can sort of be a little bit more objective and say, hey, you're out, say $20,000 and they're offering you 15. I get $5,000 is a lot of money. Yeah. But maybe it's worth it to buy your piece, sort of thing.
Right.
So,
Interesting.
So, keeping myself out of it, out of sort of the emotional state, is usually not that difficult. Particularly, because I view my job as sort of being a counselor of some sort. Sometimes attorneys are called counselor, and it's certainly not in the same way that, a therapist or something is a counselor, but
a little bit.
But yeah, we're there to give advice, and we're there to help sort of simmer people down, and they can be upset and they can yell, and then at the end of it, I know they're not yelling at me. I can sit down and say, okay, now that we've got that through, let's move forward. Let's figure this out.
Several years ago, I saw this series. It was like a limited series. I think it might have been on HBO. It was called The Night Of. And it was about this gentleman who met this girl, and he went home with her. And the next morning, she was killed. She had been murdered, and he didn't recall anything that had happened. So, of course, he was arrested. And the issue that his attorney, who was played by John Turturro, which I think I'm saying his name correctly, he was saying to this guy's like, I'm innocent. And his attorney, John, was like, it really doesn't matter if you are or not. It's what can be proven as enough to give people doubt of your innocence. That's
Right.
so he just kind of kept this kid kept saying, but I didn't, like, what about the fact that I didn't do it, and
Yeah.
he was like, you really just need to kind of give up the idea that even though you believe you're innocent, what can someone else encourage a jury to believe, and can that be proven or disproven? Really, it's like how it's the way that the truth can be used,
Right.
or the way a perception can be used to make you look kind of guilty. And I just remember that feeling of dread I had in my stomach. Like, what if I were in this situation and it sure looked like I did something bad, but I know I didn't? How would I be able to fight? Because there is this feeling in me, like, the truth is the truth,
Right.
But it really doesn't apply in when you've got a law that can be, I don't know, maybe not manipulated. I don't know if that's the right word, but the perception of the
Sure.
truth can be used in a way that
Sure.
doesn't work for you. Is there anything that surprises you about your profession in this way?
Sure. So that sort of, on that point, it's why basically any lawyer will tell you, if you're arrested, ask for a lawyer. Don't, have your rights read to you and plead the Fifth Amendment. Don't tell the police anything, because even if you're well-meaning, their job is to solve the case and find a suspect and get them, get them arrested and then get them ultimately convicted of the crime. They're not there to they're not there to help you. They're there to help society.
Solve the case, yeah.
Right, they're there to help solve the case. So, that's why the golden advice, if you're ever arrested, be quiet. Don't tell anybody anything except that you want a lawyer.
Would you do that? Would you do that if you were arrested? Would you be like, I need an attorney?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Like I said, number one, I don't know, do not specialize in criminal law.
Right.
And just like we were talking about before, when it's your own case,
yeah, you're not going to be.
The emotions come into it, and you're convinced, and you're saying, well, if I just make this argument, or if I just, present this, then everyone will know that I'm innocent. And when you have someone, looking over your shoulder who has more experience than you and is more objective than you, having someone there to say, that's not a good idea, is when you're playing with your freedom, it's priceless.
Stakes are too high.
Exactly. The plot of the show that you were just talking about reminded me of a story that I'd heard. Attorneys always trade old, war stories.
Yeah,
they call them
war stories.
Yeah. And I heard one about an attorney that was representing a defendant in a murder case, and he was fairly certain that his client was guilty. They had a lot of evidence against them. And so he went into the last day of the trial, and he decided that he needed a Hail Mary, that they weren't going to be able to get out of this on a technicality. And so he is making his closing argument, and he ends it with something along the lines of, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I can promise you that my client is not guilty. And you know how I can do that? Because the victim is going to walk through these courtroom doors right now. And he pointed at the doors of the courtroom, and the jury all turned to, and looked. And of course, nobody walked in, right? Nobody came through those doors. And then he said, but you see, you thought that I might be you thought that I might be telling the truth. You thought there was a chance someone would come through that door. That's what a reasonable doubt looks like. For 1 second, you had a doubt that there
really was a victim.
Right. And so they go back and deliberate. The jury goes back, and then they come back out, some hours later, and they find his client guilty. And afterwards, he goes back and he says, well, why did you find him guilty if you all looked? And the foreman of the jury says, yeah, we all looked, but your client didn't.
Ooh. I need a minute.
Yeah. And so
Wow.
that story always stuck with me about, the idea of a reasonable doubt and what that looks like to different people and how you introduce that in a case. Obviously, we deal with civil cases, so the burden is a little different.
Right.
But you're always, even in a civil case, where you have to convince a jury or you have to convince a judge in some cases, you're always looking for that one little piece, even if you're not going to, even if you feel like you've got a stinker, you're always looking for that one little piece that can maybe break it for you. Yeah.
What do you think people don't know about what it's like to be an attorney like you are? What would you want people to know? Do they have misconceptions of what it's like to be an attorney?
I think that obviously, I'm going to come out and say it. Attorneys are not the most popular people. There are a lot of great attorney jokes. I don't know if I can even say a lot of the ones that I know on the air, but I think that a thing that maybe most people don't know is that it's, at the end of the day, it's a job like any other. We're certainly not, these, ivory tower, people that look down on everybody else and
infallible.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Everybody makes mistakes.
Yeah.
And I would say a lot of our job is not, showing up. This differs, attorney to attorney, but a lot of the times you're not showing up to court every day to argue to the judge. You're trying, at least in my line of work, trying to work out between two people that have a problem. You're there to figure out the solution without, costing your client as little money as possible. There are some attorneys out there who, in like every profession, there's some unscrupulous ones who will, bill their client for everything, just keep the case churning just so that they can keep billing. But I think the really good ones, they're there to save as much money as possible, to stop the case, as early as possible, and to prevent it from, becoming one of these Charles Dickens-esque things where,
That's such a good concept that you just point to. Yeah, that goes on. And I imagine you're right, that there are, of course, in every profession, there are people who have nefarious intentions, but you're saying for the most part, most attorneys and lawyers that are really there doing the best job they can for their client.
They're there, and, it's sort of like doctors. They're there to help you on one of your worst days. Like pretty much like going to the doctor, unless, you're giving birth or something like that. Most of the time when you go to the doctor, you go to the hospital, you're not having a good time.
Yeah, it's a problem.
Right. And most of the time, the similar exception is adoptions. Most of the time when you're going to an attorney, you're not having a good time. There's a problem, and it's usually an expensive problem.
Yeah.
And so the really good attorneys are there to help guide you through, I think a lot of people maybe only have, hire an attorney maybe once in their life or twice in their life, and it's probably one of the lesser experiences that they have, that they're having this bad problem. But our job is to, be there for you and help you solve that problem.
What do you think your fearless formula is? In other words, obviously we're all human and have all of these different emotions, and fear oftentimes limits people's lives. In terms of the legal world, I'm sure, because the stakes can be so high in so many different ways, there is fear, or maybe trepidation or dread. What is your fearless formula? How do you work around those feelings so that it doesn't hinder you?
Mm-hmm. So I try and remember, number one, that, I made it this far. It can be easy to get wrapped up in, the minutia of a problem that you're working on. But if you sort of take a step back, take a deep breath, and realize I've gone through a whole lot worse than this. I think back to, for example, when I was in undergrad, and didn't know what I was going to do, had a microbiology degree that I didn't think I was going to get any use for, and was stocking shelves at a liquor store. And the other job I had was getting up at 5 a.m. to work at a restaurant, of the breakfast shift at a restaurant. And just, where I am now is I've come a long way since then. And so being able to sort of sit back and say, okay, I've made it this far. I've made it through challenges that are worse than this. I'm here because I can think. Now let me think about it. Is I think how I, deal with problems where I'll have self-doubts, or I'll have, fears about, well, what, is this the right step for me to take career-wise? Is this the right step for me to take professionally? Personally, is this the right, we were talking a little bit earlier, that I had recently bought a house, first-time home buyer. And, there's a lot of stress involved in that. And the same idea, sort of stepping back and thinking, all right, I've made decisions in the past. I've made good decisions. I think I can make a good decision here. Let me just think about it. So I would say if you had to put it on a bumper sticker, I'd say my fearless formula is, you're good at thinking. Let's think about it.
It's a good one. Because basically what you're saying is, I've proven to myself that I can solve problems, that I can use my best judgment. Obviously my life isn't complete disaster. I'm able to point to instances where I had a tough decision and I reasoned it out and I made the best decision I could. There's something kind of releasing about that, I guess, in a way, in that we all just make the best decisions we can in the moments that we're presented them. And then you hope you're okay to live with whatever the consequences of that. But if we are all just making the best decisions in the moment, what else can we be expected to do, right?
Right. That we only get we only get one moment at a time, and we can use our past decisions, our past moments to help make this one. But, time only moves in one direction, and you've got to make a decision. Not making a decision is a decision.
Yes.
And so, sort of accepting that, and accepting that a decision has to be made, and that thinking about, okay, now that I know that I have to make a decision, let's make it, is, I think, like you said, freeing.
Well, I mean, it's so interesting because like you said, there's this balance between being such a feeling person, and living in the worlds of feelings, but then also detaching from feelings and using what intellectually to guide people. You have a lot of hats you wear.
I suppose, yeah. There's like anybody else, I can get excited, get mad, whatever. I'm certainly not, a robot. Yeah.
That's good to know.
But yeah, it's all about, I think, knowing, through experience or intuition, what hat you need to wear in that moment. Sometimes, your client just needs to yell, or they just need to, be angry for a little bit. And at that point, nothing I learned in law school is helpful. They don't need to know about, the personal jurisdiction question or the Erie doctrine or anything. They don't need to know about that. They just, they need to have someone who can listen to them and say, okay, let's fix it. And then sometimes they come to you and say, okay, I've been sued. Here's what's going on. And you say, all right, this is a classic case where, we need to make a standing argument. Here's the things that I need from you. It's all about, having the experience and the intuition to know what hat you need to wear when.
Wow, Ben, your job, or profession, I should say, is really fascinating to me. And I'm excited to chat with you again at some point as we get further into the notion of intellectual property and AI and all of the advancements that seem to be happening even as we're sitting here having this conversation, that the world is moving so fast in a certain way, and to get the law to keep up with it is challenging. But as time goes on, I imagine we'll be making more precedences regarding
Absolutely.
all of that.
Absolutely. There's it's something that I actually write about a lot on our firm website. fcw.com has a section for blogs, and I have one that I try to keep active, where I discuss developments and things like the Copyright Office allowing AI art and how they handle that, or the Patent Office and how they handle patents that were drafted by AI or involve AI.
Good Lord. Okay, before we go, I wanted to ask you if you've heard about this. There's a program that is an AI program that if I were to type up a bunch of notes from a lecture, I can upload all of those notes and it gets translated into podcast form where two people are speaking and they're explaining in a conversation style the notes that someone took off.
That's freaky.
It is I'm just like, where do we go from here? I just can't, my brain cannot keep up. But it sounds amazing because it's spoken. It's not told in like a dry way. It's almost like you're just listening to a conversation and you can learn in a different way. Yeah,
well, it reminds me of like Blade Runner, where at some point you'll have, the AI summary. You have a lecture and then you have the AI make a summary of it. And then you upload that summary to the podcast AI format. And then you have another AI digested and summarized that. It's like you have the computers talking to the computers.
Making a movie out of it. Oh, Lord. It'll be so fascinating to observe. We're in a very interesting time right now.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a big sci-fi guy, and there are all these questions that get asked about, our place in a world with AI and computers, and what does it mean to be alive? I could talk for an hour about that.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming to the studio. It was somewhat of a last-minute addition into my Fearless Formula world, but I'm so grateful to have had a moment to chit-chat with you, because on the times that I see you, we're usually very distracted and surrounded by lots of people. So anytime I get a moment of one-on-one here in the studio and get to ask some deeper questions, I really feel like I get to understand someone a little bit better. And so thank you for being so generous.
Absolutely. I had a phenomenal time. Thank you again for having me.
Of course. If anyone wanted to get in touch with you, how could they do that?
Sure. So you can call. I work as I said, at the Flint, Connolly and Walker firm in downtown Canton. You could give us a call at 770-720-4411. You can shoot me an email at bpeeler@fcwlawfirm.com, or just look me up on the web. I think you can find me there. I don't do a whole lot of social media stuff. Just never been my thing. But those are or just call our office and ask for me, and I'm happy to help any way I can.
Well, Ben Peeler, thank you so much for coming to the studio today.
Yeah, thank you, Sharon.
Sure. And thank you all for listening to Fearless Formula here on Business RadioX. And again, this is Sharon Klein, reminding you, with knowledge and understanding, we can all have our own fearless formula. Have a great day.